Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Dai Luoli's greatest problem was that the spiritual power of his martial soul wasn't active when he cultivated. Even though there were experts in the Duke's mansion who discovered this problem, they didn't know what to do. After all, one's spiritual power was related to his soul. Souls were very magical. If Dai Luoli walked the wrong path, he might suffer from side effects, which would cause him harm. As a result, Dai Luoli continued to remain in his current state. No matter how hard he tried, he could only unleash half the strength of his martial soul. Naturally, he couldn't catch up to Dai Yueheng and Dai Huobin. Huo Yuhao was using a very simple method to stimulate his martial soul, tapping into his feelings for Shu Yun. Using love as stimulation was very difficult, and it might lead to repercussions. Of course, the prerequisite was that this love could be fulfilled after Dai Luoli's martial soul was stimulated. As a result, Huo Yuhao completely stimulated Dai Luoli's spiritual power to its extreme, enabling him to enter a state of craziness. Indeed, the spiritual components of his martial soul were completely stimulated, and his soul power rose by 2 ranks in just a short period of time. Dai Luoli didn't sense it himself, but he would immediately discover the significant changes to his body after he recovered. Seeing that the blood tiger projection was about to reach him, Huo Yuhao smiled and quickly shifted his footsteps. In an instant, he was already behind Dai Luoli. While Dai Luoli charged ferociously, the gap between him and Huo Yuhao was simply too huge. Furthermore, he was only relying on his courage to sustain himself now. Huo Yuhao smacked his palm against Dai Luoli's neck, and Dai Luoli shook slightly before he fell to the ground. At this point, the restraints on Shu Yun suddenly disappeared. She almost fell down, as she was unbalanced. After realizing she could move, she quickly rushed towards Dai Luoli. The way Dai Luoli had looked at her just now was already deeply etched in her mind. She couldn't forget the determination and fearlessness in his blood-red eyes. For me, he. At this moment, Shu Yun was only feeling very sad. She quickly helped Dai Luoli up and cried out, "Luoli, Luoli, wake up. You can't die. Wake up." As she cried out, tears were already flowing down uncontrollably. She hugged Dai Luoli, who was already covered in blood, tightly. Huo Yuhao didn't stand too far away. He smiled as he looked at them. He knew that at least his brother had found a place inside this princess's heart. As for how they were going to develop in the future, it was going to be much simpler. "Luoli, I've already done quite a bit for you. You'll have to count on yourself from now on. I'm going to kill you." Shu Yun suddenly lifted her head and glared at Huo Yuhao furiously. "You aren't an ordinary person. Tell me. Who are you? You must be a spy from the Sun Moon Empire. I'll get someone to kill you." Huo Yuhao rolled his eyes and said, "Your Highness, let's not even talk about whether I'm a soul master first. Just from how you are screaming like that, who can you get to kill me if I kill you and him first?" Shu Yun was stunned. Yes. Only the 3 of them were here. Why weren't there any guards patrolling this place even though they had made such a huge commotion? It was because she had told them not to disturb her in her cultivation. Right now, she was the only one who could fight Huo Yuhao. What could she do? Huo Yuhao slowly walked towards her. While Shu Yun was a soul master, she was more like a little girl. She lacked fighting experience, and looked very terrified now. As she hugged Dai Luoli tightly, she lost her voice and said, You, don't come over." Huo Yuhao calmly smiled and said, "He's not dead yet. Tell you what, let me kill him first. Then you can swear not to divulge my identity. I'll spare you then." "What about that?" "Impossible." Shu Yun carried Dai Luoli as she suddenly stood up. There was a fierce look in her eyes, and she glared at Huo Yuhao. "I'm from the imperial family of the Star Luo Empire. I can only be a princess who dies in a fight, but not a princess who lives humiliatingly. If you want to kill him, then you better kill the both of us." Huo Yuhao nodded in his heart. "My younger brother has good taste. While this princess is a little overbearing and unreasonable, she has her principles." Furthermore, he discovered that Shu Yun seemed to be thinking of a solution of how to escape from his fingertips. He smiled and his eyes flashed with a trace of dim purplish gold. Shu Yun suddenly felt a weird spiritual undulation appearing. In the next moment, she became giddy before she fainted. Huo Yuhao walked forward and supported her body. After that, he took Dai Luoli from her arms and placed her on the ground. "Commander Shu has fainted," Huo Yuhao shouted. Then, carrying Dai Luoli, he transformed into an illusory projection before disappearing. When Dai Luoli woke up from his deep sleep, it was already the next morning. He opened his eyes wide, and the sky was already slightly bright. Dai Luoli only felt that his body was very warm and comfortable. His soul power surged strongly in his body, and an unprecedented sense of strength filled his entire body. More strangely, he was stunned to realize that his feeling of everything around him was not a result of his visual perception of them, but because there seemed to be another pair of eyes helping him to survey his surroundings. This was. As he opened his eyes, Dai Luoli sat up in his bed. The recruits from the first bunk also woke up at this moment, and quickly donned their uniforms before washing up. After this, they went for breakfast. Everything that had happened last night played itself out in Dai Luoli's head. When he looked at his own body, he discovered that there weren't any injuries. Furthermore, he was dry and clean. His uniform was placed neatly to one side, as if he had never worn it before. Was everything last night a dream? Dai Luoli was in disbelief. Was I really dreaming? No, I couldn't be. How could it be so painful in my dream? Yes, it was him. He twisted his head to look at Tang Dong. Tang Dong had just changed into his uniform, and was lazily stretching his waist. It seemed like he could sense Dai Luoli looking over, and immediately turned his head to look back. After this, he revealed a kind smile. Dai Luoli was too curious, and couldn't take it anymore. He quickly got up from his bed, and put his uniform on before going to find Tang Dong. Dai Luoli was confused as he asked, "Tang Dong, what happened to me last night? Why do I remember that I was being beaten up very tragically by you?" Huo Yuhao chortled, "Is that so? If you think that's the case, then that's the case. However, do you really not remember what happened? Come on, let's go have breakfast. I'll tell you as we eat." As he spoke, he dragged Dai Luoli to go freshen up. Dai Luoli looked at him with an abnormal expression, and was even more confused. However, it wasn't very appropriate for him to question Tang Dong with so many recruits around. After freshening up, the two of them went to have breakfast. In the canteen, they squatted down at one side to have their breakfast. What exactly happened last night? Dai Luoli couldn't help but ask. Huo Yuhao smiled and said, "Let's not talk while we eat. Let's talk after we finish eating." Dai Luoli felt as if a ball of fire was slowly rising in his chest. If not for the fact that he couldn't beat Huo Yuhao, he would have whacked him by now. It was a pity that this was only a thought in his head. He knew he didn't have any chance of winning against someone as perverted as Huo Yuhao. He could only continue eating. After he quickly finished his breakfast, he turned his attention towards Huo Yuhao again. Huo Yuhao said, "Come, let me show you something." As he spoke, Huo Yuhao grabbed his shoulder. At the start, Dai Luoli wasn't very used to Huo Yuhao doing this. However, he started to become more accustomed to it after a month. Anyway, he couldn't beat Huo Yuhao in a fight. However, it was different this time. When Huo Yuhao grabbed his shoulder, Dai Luoli suddenly sensed everything around him changing. The originally bright sky turned dark, and daytime turned to nighttime. Before he exclaimed, Huo Yuhao's voice already sounded in his mind, "Don't be shocked. Take a closer look. Don't you want to know what happened last night?" Yes, it was nighttime. It was nighttime in their military camp, and they were on the military drill grounds. Very soon, Dai Luoli saw himself charging towards Huo Yuhao like a mad tiger. However, he was flung back every single time. It wasn't an illusion. Everything that had happened last night was true. It wasn't an illusion. Furthermore, he watched how anxious he was as a bystander. However, he didn't know why Shuyun was unable to move. When he saw the expression on Shuyun's face, Dai Luoli subconsciously clenched his fist. "Take a look at yourself." Huo Yuhao's voice sounded again. Dai Luoli subconsciously turned his attention towards his own body. Suddenly, he realized there was something different about him. When he saw the blood tiger projection behind him, and sensed the powerful spiritual undulations that he released, he was in a daze. Is that really me? But why am I so different? Since when was my spiritual power so great? Did my soul power increase today because of? Just as he was wondering about a lot of things, he saw himself being thrown to the ground by Huo Yuhao once again, before he lost consciousness. After this, he saw Shuyun charging to his side and hugging him tightly. She was crying for him. She even mentioned how she was willing to die with him when Huo Yuhao claimed that he wanted to kill him. After this, Shuyun fainted. Huo Yuhao then shouted before leaving with him. He found a water vat near the canteen and cleaned him up before stealing a new uniform from the military store. The illusory nighttime disappeared, and it was daytime again. Everything returned to normal. What do you feel? Huo Yuhao's voice sounded once again. Dai Luoli twisted his head to look at him as if he were looking at a monster. Huo Yuhao smiled and asked, I'm asking you about your feelings after seeing what I've shown you. Dai Luoli subconsciously said, it would have been great if I was conscious when Yuna hugged me. Huo Yuhao was speechless as he smacked his forehead and said, I knew it. You emotional creature. I was asking you how you felt when you erupted last night. Didn't you realize that your martial soul has become different? Dai Luoli was very wary as he looked at Huo Yuhao and said, who are you exactly? What's with that illusion just now? Also, how did you know Yuna was a princess? Huo Yuhao laughed, it seems you're not that dumb after all. I'm Tang Dong. I'm only Tang Dong. You just need to know that. You should have felt that you've gained something over the past month. You must work hard for your Yuna, though. This is all that I can do for you. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards their bunk. They still had some time to rest before their training started. Dai Luoli seemed very uncertain as he watched Huo Yuhao leaving. Who is he exactly? No matter how slow he was right now, he could still sense that Huo Yuhao wasn't an ordinary person. He had 3 rings, but he couldn't defeat an ordinary person. He was very doubtful about this. Even Shuyun was also weaker than him, even though she had 4 rings. It seemed like they were both very far off from him. I should have thought that he was a soul master. I just don't know what type of soul master he is. However, what's he doing in the military? He's right. I can sense it. Dai Luoli calmed down and carefully recalled everything that had happened between him and Tang Dong over the last month. While he was beaten up every day, he was surprised to realize that his cultivation had slowly increased. It was something that had never happened before. Even when his father took some time to guide him, the improvements he made couldn't compare to what he had achieved over the last month. The weirder thing was the state he was in last night. He said that my martial soul has changed. He shut his eyes and silently sensed his martial soul. Very soon, he was surprised and immersed in this delightful surprise. Yes, his martial soul had indeed changed. In fact, it had grown stronger, which was beyond his imagination. He felt as if he had been reborn. Tang Dong, who are you? Did my father send you to help me? However, he clearly looks like he's around the same age as me. Why is he so strong? Who exactly is he? As he carried these doubts with him, Dai Luoli continued to sense his martial soul. The spirituality of his martial soul had finally been awakened. Everything had changed and become very beautiful. Today's training was on fighting together as a team. The recruits were separated into several rows, and some held up shields, while others grasped spears. The shields were placed in front, while the spears were held in preparation behind the shields. The recruits were required to do everything neatly and in synchronicity with every step they took. The equipment they were using for training had been specially enhanced. It was twice as heavy as their regular equipment, and was used to train the recruits' bodies and stability. Go! Zhuang Qian hollered at the recruits. The soldiers holding shields took a step forward in unison and raised their shields. They were adjusted to uniformity after today's training. Formations were very effective in a war, and an army which had gone through disciplined training could rely on formations to fight against scattered soldiers with numbers multiple times their own. The recruits holding spears quickly stepped after the recruits holding shields and pointed their spears forwards, as they aimed at the cracks between the shields. They moved as if they were about to lash out at any moment. Every time Zhuang Qian shouted loudly, the formation shifted one step forward as a whole. The formation followed his various commands, and different recruits moved at different speeds and with different footwork. Small Team 1's movements were the neatest amongst the teams. Small Team 1's leader, Tang Dong, was holding a spear, while Vice Team leader Dai Luoli was holding a shield. They lead their entire small team, and they made sure that every action was done properly. After today's observation, Zhuang Qian was sure that he would make sure that these 2 people were promoted to actual small team leaders after their basic military training was over. Soldiers of such quality were few and far between. At this moment, a horseman came riding towards them from a distance. Dai Luoli was fully concentrated on completing his training when his frame suddenly froze as he saw this rider's figure. He subconsciously glanced at Huo Yuhao behind him. This rider moved very quickly and arrived in the blink of an eye. Attention! Zhuang Qian hollered at everyone. The recruits holding shields withdrew their shields in front of their chests, while the soldiers holding spears planted their spears vertically on the ground as they stood up straight. Battalion Commander Zhuang Qian saluted the rider. The little princess, Xu Yun, was the one who had ridden here. Xu Yun could see Dai Luoli and Huo Yuhao with one look, because they were standing in front of their group. She had just woken up after she had fainted, and she realized that the sky was already bright when she woke up, while she was back in her own tent. If waves of pain hadn't been coming from her abdomen, she would have actually thought what happened yesterday was all just a dream. However, that dream was just too real. When she saw with her own eyes that Dai Luoli was standing in formation in perfect condition, she heaved a big sigh of relief. However, her eyebrows went vertical when she saw Huo Yuhao. Of course, what happened last night couldn't possibly be a dream. Up until now, her abdomen was still throbbing agonizingly after being kicked twice last night. Xu Yun was instantly infuriated when she saw Tang Dong standing solemnly within the formation. This bastard really knows how to pretend. Shall I expose him? Xu Yun immediately extinguished this thought as soon as it appeared in her head. The reason for that was simple, both Dai Luoli and Tang Dong were both standing in formation perfectly. She thought back to everything that had happened last night, and she really wasn't sure why Tang Dong had joined the military. If he was a spy, he would have killed Dai Luoli and her a long time ago. If that was the case, how could Dai Luoli continue his military training with his body in perfect condition? Xu Yun nodded in Zhuang Qian's direction as thoughts spun in her head. Large team leader Zhuang, how is the recruits' training going? Zhuang Qian answered respectfully, the recruits' performance is all right. Small team 1's performance is especially outstanding among them. They all have good potential. Zhuang Qian was never stingy with compliments about his outstanding subordinates. Oh? They've only been training for 1 month, and you're describing them as outstanding. Seems like they are quite impressive, after all. Soldiers can improve best when they are in actual combat. Why don't we do this? Let my personal bodyguards accompany them for a practice battle. Shashaw, call my bodyguards. Shashaw hesitated for a moment and glanced at Zhuang Qian. Even though they didn't know where Xu Yun was from, they could faintly guess that this beautiful battalion commander came from an aristocratic family, and she was likely here to gild her family. Therefore, the few of them were only respectful on the surface this entire time. Letting her personal bodyguards have a practice battle with recruits, did the battalion commander actually think of that? Battalion commanders had their own personal bodyguards. One medium team was assigned as a battalion commander's bodyguard, and they usually comprised the most outstanding soldiers in the battalion. What? Were my words not clear enough? Xu Yun frowned deeply, and a formless pressure was unleashed from her body. Zhuang Qian glared at Shashaw, and Shashaw hurriedly answered respectfully before jogging away. Only then did Zhuang Qian turn towards Xu Yun with some hesitation in his expression. Battalion commander, your personal bodyguards are all the best of the best. Don't you think they're a little overqualified for combat practice with these recruits? Why don't we let these recruits spar amongst themselves? Xu Yun waved her hand and said, I want to show them how big the gap is between them and real soldiers. Don't worry, my bodyguards know their limits. In the military, even a difference of 1 rank meant the lower-ranked officer would have to listen to orders. Zhuang Qian was feeling a little dispirited inside, but he couldn't say anything against her wishes. It didn't take long before a squad of 50 soldiers jogged over neatly. These soldiers all seemed like they had wide waists and large arms, and everyone had a shield in their left hand, a long knife strapped to their waist, and was wearing leather armor. They were all privates first class, and in addition to the fact that their rows were very neat, they seemed very intimidating. Reporting, Your personal bodyguards are all in position. The medium team leader of Xu Yun's bodyguards was a youth that looked especially tough and muscular. His eyes sparkled, and there were clearly some other things besides respect in his eyes as he stared at Xu Yun. Xu Yun nodded and said, the recruits that Zhuang Qian is responsible for have performed excellently. Wang Yu, pick 30 people, and have a practice fight with small team 1 from the recruits. Your knives cannot leave their sheaths, and nobody can get hurt. Do you understand? Wang Yu's eyes sparkled as he shouted, understood. He didn't need Xu Yun to instruct him. The battalion commander's decision to allow her bodyguards to have a practice fight against these recruits means one of two things. Either she wants to teach the large team leader a lesson, or there are some troublemakers among the recruits who have made her angry. We'll just teach them a lesson. Small team 1, 2, and 3. Step out. Wang Yu hollered at the top of his voice, and 30 guards swiftly jogged out and arranged themselves in one line. Zhuang Qian came up beside Huo Yuhao and whispered, Tang Dong. I'm not sure why the battalion commander wants to have a practice fight like this, but you have to be careful and focus on defense. These fellows from her team of bodyguards are very rough and violent. Make sure you keep your formation in order. I'll ask the battalion commander to stop after you guys have held on for a little while. Yes, sir, Huo Yuhao acknowledged, but he was a little amused. This little princess is so childish. She wants to target me, but too bad for her. I am small team 1's team leader. But is there any meaning to this? Does she think that her personal bodyguards can force me to release my martial soul? Listen up, small team 1. Take 3 steps forward together and separate into 2 rows. Prepare for battle. Huo Yuhao shouted at his team. Small team 1's recruits stared at those bodyguards, who had backs like tigers and waists like bears, and their faces turned yellow with fear. But strangely, after Huo Yuhao shouted at them, they all felt galvanized and invigorated, as if they had been injected with stimulants. They didn't seem afraid of the opponents in front of them anymore, and everyone took 3 broad steps forward with their chins raised. Those who were holding spears turned their spears around at the same time. They were having a practice fight, after all, and using their spears' handles prevented anyone from getting hurt. Xu Yun waved her hand and said, begin. Wang Yu personally joined the formation, and eyed the recruits in front him mockingly as he shouted, shields up. The guards raised the shields in their left hands, their right hands grasping long knives that were still sheathed. These long knives were different from those of normal foot soldiers. Foot soldiers' knives didn't have sheaths, but these bodyguards had long knives that came with sheaths, and their blades were made of steel. The sheaths made them more than twice as heavy as normal knives, and one needed a certain standard of strength to wield one. Charge! Wang Yu shouted at the top of his voice, and the 30 bodyguards charged furiously and in unison at the recruits. There were only 30 soldiers, but these bodyguards had been through much training and were cherry-picked. Their fighting strength was far superior to normal soldiers, and they pushed forward with large strides at incredible speed while maintaining their formation at the same time. Shields, bow stance, spears, barricade stance. Huo Yuhao hollered. He didn't intend to use his abilities to affect this practice combat. Instead, he wanted to use the things he had learned today in his training. After his shout reignited the other recruits were to fight, he didn't intend to use any soul power or spiritual power. The recruits in the front row held their shields with both hands as they took a bow stance and placed their shields in front of them. They used a stance that was meant to barricade against a charge, and spears protruded through the gaps between 2 shields. The spears' tips were planted diagonally onto the ground, as if they were repelling cavalry. The shields in a bow stance, in addition to the spears in a barricade stance, were normally used against cavalry, but Huo Yuhao still commanded them to use this tactic against the bodyguards, who were rushing at them. Of course, the spear tips were supposed to be pointing forward in normal situations. Wang Yu was a little stunned, but immediately recovered and ordered, slow down, draw your blades and slash them. The bodyguards instantly slowed down, when they were less than 10 meters from the recruits. They raised their knives with their right hands and prepared to attack. Right at that moment, Huo Yuhao suddenly shouted, charge at full speed. The recruits holding shields in a bow stance instantly charged forward at full speed, while those who were holding spears followed closely behind. Huo Yuhao himself was holding a spear, and rushed right towards Wang Yu. Furthermore, he deliberately made sure that he was moving a little faster than his comrades, and he ran forward shoulder to shoulder with Dai Luoli. He whispered something in Dai Luoli's ear there. Dai Luoli didn't really feel much about this contest, but his eyes instantly became sharp when he heard Huo Yuhao's words. Dai Luoli suddenly erupted with speed as he bolted forward and went straight for Wang Yu. Wang Yu swung his long blade disdainfully against his sudden burst of speed, and sliced down with his sheathed blade at Dai Luoli. A dull sound could be heard as Wang Yu felt a huge force hit him, and his knife was bounced away as he slashed at the shield. Furthermore, the shield crashed heavily into him, sending him hurtling through the air. Dai Luoli charged the fastest, so his clash with Wang Yu was naturally the first to take place. Wang Yu was the one sent flying through the air, and this unexpected outcome caused the bodyguards to be a little dazed, but lifted the spirits of the recruits. A sudden change in morale was enough to affect the entire situation in a close-quarters battle. Furthermore, the recruits were the ones charging forward, and they received a great morale boost, while the bodyguards were demoralized as they clashed violently. The sounds of combat rang out. The recruits' formation had 2 layers, while the bodyguards only had 1. Initially, Wang Yu thought the bodyguards would have no problem dealing with the recruits, given their quality, even if they were 1 layer against 2. However, under Huo Yuhao's ingenious command, the recruits' dual-layered formation's advantage was immediately unleashed. The recruits' strength was quite a far cry from the bodyguards. However, the recruits weren't at a disadvantage when they clashed, because of their forward momentum. Both forces were presented as comparable to one another, and the spearmen in the second row lashed out at this moment. They jabbed the blunt end of their spears like poisonous snakes sticking out their forked tongues. The bodyguards had formidable fighting strength, but they were still sent into disarray. The bodyguards, who didn't clash directly with the recruits, because of their single-layered formation wrapped around from the side. However, there was someone anchoring down the recruits' flanks. Small Team 1's team leader, Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao swung the blunt end of his spear as he smacked a bodyguard and sent him flying through the air. Huo Yuhao looked like he was very focused on trying to control the spear in his hands, and there didn't seem to be anything especially powerful about him, but the bodyguards on the flanks just couldn't cross his line. Furthermore, the recruits weren't surrounded thanks to Huo Yuhao's agile movement and footwork. Dai Luoli's fighting strength had been unleashed at this point. He held his shield and charged through the bodyguards' ranks like a tiger running through a flock of sheep. He sent bodyguards flying through the air with his shield, one after another. His teamwork with Huo Yuhao was stellar. Huo Yuhao barricaded the flanks, while he helped the other recruits deal with the bodyguards. They already had twice as many people, and in addition to the fact that he was a soul master who was hiding his abilities, the gap between the two forces was pulled even closer. More than half of the bodyguards had collapsed to the ground by the time Wang Yu got to his feet somewhere nearby, and the recruits' confidence was greatly boosted as they began to reinforce Huo Yuhao. Zhuang Qian's eyes were open wide, and his jaw hung slack as he watched the battle's transformations. Not in his wildest dreams did he think that these recruits could reach such a standard under Huo Yuhao's command. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao and Dai Luoli's individual fighting strength was presented as finely as they could be. Shishuo was a medium team leader, and directly in charge of small team 1. He felt a little dazed as he muttered, They won? What's happening? The contest was over when the last bodyguard was surrounded and knocked to the ground. Shuyun stared coldly at Huo Yuhao, and then at Dai Luoli beside him. She suddenly exclaimed, Small Team 1's leader and vice leader, step out and come in front of me. Dai Luoli was momentarily stunned, and only then did he realize that he had gone a little overboard. He had knocked down the largest number of people, and he didn't hold back his strength at all. Huo Yuhao had barricaded the bodyguards and stopped them from flanking the recruits, but his performance was clearly a lot more normal compared to Dai Luoli's performance. Dai Luoli couldn't help but feel great regret in his heart. But how could he have held himself back? What Huo Yuhao said to him was far too provoking. Huo Yuhao's sentence was simple. He secretly told Dai Luoli that the bodyguard's team leader was his rival in love. Rivals in love would be especially filled with anger when they met each other, so. Dai Luoli glanced at Huo Yuhao, but Huo Yuhao was already casually walking towards Shuyun. Dai Luoli had no choice but to follow behind him and walk towards Shuyun as well. They came up before Shuyun and stood at attention. Dai Luoli lowered his head, but Huo Yuhao saluted Shuyun very normally. Shuyun stared at them coldly and said, The two of you are in cahoots, am I right? Dai Luoli raised his head. He responded with an astonished look on his face, What cahoots? Shuyun laughed coldly and said, You still want to act. The two of you are clearly in cahoots, and your father has sent him here to protect you, except I am being kept in the dark. He's here to work together with you so that you can gain my sympathy, right? No, it's not like that, Dai Luoli blurted with a stunned look on his face, We weren't acquainted before this. Shuyun's eyes sparkled furiously. You aren't acquainted with him? If you didn't know him before this, how can the two of you work together with such chemistry even after he gave you such a painful beating yesterday? Dai Luoli suddenly realized that there was no way he could explain himself, because even he suspected that the White Tiger Duke had sent Huo Yuhao let alone Huo Yun. Huo Yuhao felt a little speechless, as he stood to one side. Shouldn't the two of you find somewhere else to talk about this? We're on a military drill ground. Are you two trying to publicize your identities? Huo Yun's eyes focused. Wasn't that true? All the soldiers around them and even the officers were all looking at them. Even though Huo Yun had deliberately lowered her voice, there was no way she could hide her expression. The two of you, follow me, Huo Yun said loudly before she turned around and jumped back onto her horse. She turned the horse and cracked her whip as she galloped into the distance. Dai Luoli glared at Huo Yuhao and said, "You've created so much trouble for me." Huo Yuhao put on an innocent look and replied, "Then you should create some trouble for me, too. You raised your soul power 2 or 3 ranks in one go. I want something as good as that." Dai Luoli was also rendered speechless. He tugged on Huo Yuhao's sleeve and said, "Hurry and follow me so we can explain ourselves. Otherwise, I'm finished." He pulled Huo Yuhao after Huo Yun as he spoke. Huo Yuhao had no choice but to follow. Dai Luoli asked him as they jogged, "Are you really sent by my father?" Huo Yuhao rolled his eyes and replied, "Of course not. I don't like your father at all." That was definitely the truth. Dai Luoli looked at him in confusion and asked, "You don't like my father? He's a national hero." Huo Yuhao's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Dai Luoli was getting worried. What should we do? Yuna has misunderstood me. How am I supposed to explain myself? Huo Yuhao turned around to look at him. Will you listen to me if I give you a suggestion? Dai Luoli was momentarily stunned. Huo Yuhao rolled his eyes and said, "Let me tell you, there's no way you can explain yourself at a time like this. She will think that you're just trying to cover everything up no matter what you say, and she has already made up her mind that you pulled a trick by injuring yourself, so you could gain her sympathy and get closer to her. Furthermore, you seemed as energetic as could be today. What resemblance was there to how you were almost beaten to death last night? Isn't that your fault?" Dai Luoli answered angrily, "So, what should I do, exactly?" Huo Yuhao said, "Why are you asking me if you are unwilling to listen to me? You can think of a solution yourself." Dai Luoli pulled a long face and muttered, "All right, big brother. You should stop being angry with me for nothing. Quick, teach me. I'll listen to you, all right." Huo Yuhao felt his heart quiver subtly when Dai Luoli called him big brother. Dai Luoli was his biological younger brother, after all. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao had no problems with him, like he did with Dai Yueheng and Dai Huobin. Huo Yuhao's heart softened as he heaved a faint sigh and said, "You are confused because you are too concerned. You should." Huo Yuhao whispered something in Dai Luoli's ear. Dai Luoli's eyes grew bigger by the second, and his eyes were completely wide, and his jaw hung slack when Huo Yuhao was finished. "Are you sure this will work, boss? Don't play me. I could die from this." Dai Luoli's cheeks were starting to spasm. Huo Yuhao said plainly, "It's up to you whether you want to believe me. What I told you is what you should do to deal with that arrogant princess." Huo Yuhao wasn't experienced with courting girls, and neither was he a flirt, but from his experience with Donga and Chioa as examples, and with the Tang sect's various relationships twists and turns, along with the fact that he was older than Dai Luoli by quite a bit, he had a deeper understanding about the romantic feelings between guys and girls. Huo Yun had already stopped in her tracks not far from them. The two of them were coming closer, and Dai Luoli couldn't think of a good solution by himself. He gritted his teeth and said, "All right, I'll trust you this once. If I succeed, then you'll be my older brother." Huo Yuhao was the one who twitched his mouth this time. He thought to himself, "I am your older brother in the first place." They quickly arrived in front of an indignant Huo Yun. Huo Yuhao patted Dai Luoli on the back, and Dai Luoli immediately understood what he was trying to say. His expression changed swiftly. All his anxiety and worry from before disappeared, and he became very calm. Huo Yun didn't get down from her horse. She turned her horse around to face them and said, "Don't you want to explain?" "Explain then. I want to hear what you have to say." This sentence was clearly meant for Dai Luoli. Dai Luoli said nothing. His expression was still plain and calm, and he grabbed his shirt's collar, as he suddenly lifted his hands and took his shirt off. "Ah!" Huo Yun screamed as she hurriedly covered her eyes. "Don't you want an explanation? You can see for yourself," Dai Luoli muttered plainly. Huo Yun's astonishment was temporary. She peeked at him through the cracks of her fingers when she heard his words, and she drew a cold breath in the next moment. She lowered her hands subconsciously in the next moment. There were dozens of intertwining wounds all over Dai Luoli's body. Some had already formed scabs, while others were still oozing with fresh blood. His appearance seemed unnaturally frightening. Dai Luoli slowly turned around and turned his back to Xu Yun. His back had the same number of wounds. If you think I am injuring myself to gain your sympathy, then so be it. I can stand here today, because some of my martial soul's special abilities have been unleashed, and my martial soul has sublimated. That is all I have to say, and you can believe whatever you want to. He put his shirt back on after he finished his sentence. He then turned and walked back towards where the recruits were training. Xu Yun called out subconsciously, "Come back here, Dai Luoli." Her words weren't so effective this time. Dai Luoli seemed like he didn't hear her at all as he continued striding back toward the other recruits. This video will end here.